is architect Saif Haque, based in Dhaka. I have an architectural practice of my own, and I'm the principal of that practice. And I'm also director of a institute called Bengal Institute, where we do research and design, and we have academic programs. So, and I have worked on like a different number of different projects which had social implications. And I have written, I've been involved in teaching, and I have organized exhibitions, I have published. So I had a varied experience so far, and I'm very happy to be participating in this forum. In fact, it's a great honor to be part of this ASA forum, and at the same time, I thank the forum organizers for the invitation to share my thoughts on heritage. Though I'm not an heritage expert, but this topic is of great interest to me. And on occasions, I've also worked on heritage. The painful experience of going through this pandemic and the disruptions caused has brought many restrictions to our lives and many uncertainties. When I received the invitation to this forum, the forecast of a pandemic was nowhere in our radar, and this forum was supposed to take place physically in Bangkok, and now being held a year late and also being hosted virtually from Bangkok. The virtual world was in existence before the pandemic, and now it has become essential to carry out our work and to remain connected. Thailand is an ancient land with a rich cultural heritage, and the city of Bangkok is an important place within this heritage context. Both the country and the city has modernized as well as retained the richness of its heritage. I had the opportunity of visiting Bangkok earlier, but it was a stressful condition, and I will look forward to an opportune moment in future to experience physically the wonderful heritage of both the country and the city of Bangkok. The theme of this year's ASA Forum, Refocus Architecture, Seeing Old Things in New Light, a timely one, no doubt. The need for refocusing on heritage and the way we currently see the old needs review. It must have appeared important for discussion to the organizers of this forum. The task of architects are intertwined with heritage, and as for myself, I've always had considered heritage as an important part of my thinking process. The opportunity of visiting this topic is always an welcome one. Acknowledging the importance, I plan to approach the theme with a slight change by focusing on seeing the new in the old rather than old in the new. I begin this discussion with two assumptions. First assumption is that our overwhelming attention to the new could possibly be a reason for heritage issues getting pushed in the background. The second assumption is that our current way of seeing the heritage needs revision. In testing the validity of these assumptions, this discussion will go through a path of historical retrospection in the context of Bangladesh. This is for the first assumption. And for the second one, the discussion will touch a recent architectural event in the global context where the issues of climate change, inequality, and the recent addition of pandemic are connected. The second part will further examine the demand for new and its relationship to the old. I hope that by the end of the discussion, few possible ways are identified for both specific, local, and also global context. The birth of an individual human being takes place at an existing environment. This environment at birth is an inherited one, and the creations and accumulations taking place during the span of a life of an individual becomes the inheritance for the succeeding generation. The long history of humans tells us the continuity of this process of creations and accumulations. The creations are connected to our day-to-day needs, including buildings and settlements. Many of these creations have survived thousands of years and have become part of our accumulations. After careful scrutiny by individuals, nation states, and global entities, a selection of these are designated as heritage. This assigning of the heritage status to a selection and their caring are done on the basis of their cultural and economic values by succeeding generations, and of which architects are also a part. On the other hand, the natural world, altered by both natural and human actions, are passed on from generation to generation. The state of the earth, inherited by an individual human being at birth, becomes an altered one at the time of death. Similar to the creations of humans, the places endeared by humans and critical to the survival of the planet also gets assigned as heritage. We are already in the third decade of the 21st century and living in a world largely shaped by social, political, and economic events of the last few centuries, with Europe and America playing a dominant role. Colonization and industrialization were the two main forces that contributed to this shaping. In addition to the shaping of the physical world, our mental world, including the notion of heritage, was also shaped. That continues to be an influential factor of our thinking process till today. The emergence of large number of newly independent countries at the end of colonial rule in the mid-20th century gave a new political identity to the post-colonial world. A number of these countries chose to maintain link with the former colonizing countries and look for developing cooperation. Additionally, new links were also established that included America, already an influential country of the world. Europe and America were looked as models of social, economic, and cultural development. On the other hand, another group of newly independent countries looked towards the communist and the socialist countries as models of development. And that resulted in a world divided into a capitalist and a socialist one. And finally, these two worlds merged with the end of the Cold War in the 80s that ushered in the era of globalization, sweeping the world during the last few decades. In the present day South Asia, the subject of heritage as evolved during the colonial period made a transition into the post-colonial period as a colonial legacy, receiving a renewed interest in light of independence. Bangladesh also shares this trajectory. Architecture in Bangladesh, from the ancient to the modern, shows a number of transformations, noticeable in their expression, organization, construction technology, and use. So, from 3rd century BC, the monastic establishments, to the 20th century institutional buildings, one can observe this changes, this transformation. In the pre-colonial times, despite political and cultural changes, a continuity is observed that implies the influence of the existing was on the new. And these are evident from the historical descriptions, surviving examples, and the scholarly discussions on them. The colonial experience brought a complete change to this practice, and the break is observed. Although an extensive interest in the local heritage by the colonial rulers are observed from individual to the institutional level, but drawing inspiration from them for contemporary productions is less evident. Institutions were established for overseeing historic sites and monuments, and many rules and regulations were established for the protection and conservation. But at the same time, we see a neglect to the traditional architecture and settlements. A duality of viewing heritage was thus established. In the last 7 decades, since the end of the colonial rule, much of the colonial practice have undergone significant transformation, but further work is required for their updating in the current and future needs. The post-colonial beginning required establishment of institutions for offering architectural education. And Bangladesh, with an architectural tradition that can be traced to 3rd century BC, saw the establishment of an architecture school in early 1960s, which was established with the assistance of United States government. And the curriculum was modeled after the architectural education in the US. The component of local history and tradition fell short for obvious reasons that needed the efforts of few decades to fulfill this gap. Bangladesh at the moment has nearly 25 schools of architecture. This brings us to the mention of a architectural society that was established in the 1980s under the leadership of the architect Mazhar Islam. And this society undertook an extensive survey of architectural heritage sites all over the country and produced a collection of basic drawings that materialized in an exhibition and the book in the late 90s. It was almost a work of 10 years that took the society to about 100 different places of the country and preparing these measured drawings. During the last 2 decades, various institutions, both public and private, have carried out significant documentation of the built heritage, producing substantial materials for study and preservation works. The issue of heritage has gained importance in education, practice, and in discourses at different public and private institutions and forums. The progress towards the development to show you. This is the cover of the book that got published out of this documentation that was done in the 80s and 90s by the Society of Chaitanya. The progress towards the development of awareness regarding heritage and its preservation has no doubt made significant progress and is evident for the work that has been done. Listing and protection measures have improved, and quite a few examples of restoration and conservation works are already there. Despite the progress, there is a continuation of an apathy towards heritage. And this is quite evident when we see wanton destruction of built and natural heritage in an economically driven development agenda. The coexistence of the old and the new is yet to be fully appreciated, and at times choices are presented as either this or that, not both. The campaign for safeguarding the mangrove forest of Sundarban, a World Heritage Site, from the construction of a power plant in close proximity, met with little success. In a much recent development taking place from the end of last year, the architects and the members of the civil society have been carrying out a campaign to save from demolition two prominent modern architectural heritages located in Dhaka, the main railway station and the Dhaka University Teachers and Students Center. The campaign so far has not yielded much success. In conclusion to this first part of my discussion, can be said that the advancement of work related to heritage since the end of colonial period now faces the challenge of development, and that calls for further work covering broader grounds. Now, moving into the second part of my discussion, to see heritage from a global context and in the light of sustainability, climate change, and inequality. I'm beginning this part by making a reference to this year's Pritzker Prize. Every year, architects around the world await the announcement of the winner of this prestigious Pritzker Architecture Prize. This eagerly awaited event not only names the winner, but along with this, the announcement also communicates to architects and others as well an important message on the current thinking in architecture. The choice of the duo Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal carries a message for a climate change and inequality challenged world, further aggravated by the pandemic. Of the reasons mentioned in the award citation, one is their attention to the existing building and readily available materials that I find quite relevant for this discussion on heritage. Adaptive reuse has been in practice for quite some time, but it was mostly applicable to buildings assigned with a heritage status. But here, with the work of Lacaton and Russell, we are offered with the option of taking reuse further into the existing building stock. The existing stock is not expected to be uniform everywhere. Rather, it will be different on their accounting, assessment, Categorization needs to be done accordingly. This will offer the basis for their reuse. So if we look that instead of demolishing existing buildings and not very old, very recent buildings, we can continue to keep these buildings in use and without doing new structures, we can reduce the impact of carbon emission and also we can offer this existing resources to people who need them most. So in that way, we can curtail our demand for new. And if we look at the building types and stock, we find a rich variety all over the world. In view of challenges related to the issue of sustainability, climate change, and social inequality, the consideration of including everything existing, human made or natural, does not only provide a viable option for facing the challenges, but also can increase the scope of seeing heritage in a much broader scope and beyond the conventional view of only listed sites or buildings. I'm aware that within the current scope, there are plenty to take care of. And with an expanded scope, it will get further loaded. At the same time, if we want to put an end to the wanton destruction of the human made and the natural in making room for the new, this expanded scope is justified. The demand for the new arises from a variety of reasons, and without a careful scrutiny of the demands and their impacts on the existing, there is a possibility that may end up causing greater harm and then getting benefited. To maintain the equilibrium of the Earth system, this is of great importance. The idea here is not to downplay the role of the new, but to put emphasis on the need for a critical examination of the demand for new and the resulting consequence on the existing. Let me show you this map of Bangladesh that shows the areas that have the possibility of going underwater due to global warming and climate change. So we already know that Bangladesh is a small country in terms of land area with a huge population, and one can imagine the impact of the climate change on this small area. So this area is not only the existing settlements and lands are going to be affected, but also there are many important heritage sites. And there are two important world heritages located within this area that is going to go under water because of global warming. This year's Pritzker Prize winners selection is an important pointer towards taking action. Architects, whether directly linked to heritage or not, have an important role to play in this expanded scope being discussed. This expanded scope will have much complexities and requires detailing that can be undertaken with the involvement of various other disciplines covering not only scientific and artistic aspects, but also aspects of finance, implementation, institutions, and the legalities. Now, moving into the new. old. Talking about new in a discussion of heritage might not be a comfortable fit, but considering the impact of the new on the old, this could be relevant. The production of the new is an age old tradition, and the new comes from the demands of improvement, novelty, emerging needs, and most importantly, due to increase in population. As long as demands are there, human society will be needing new buildings, new cities, new parks, new interiors, and new products. And at the same time, we'll also be needing retrofitting, renovation, conservation, and preservation of the existing. My interest in discussion of the new is more in relation to making decision, constructing, and using the new rather than the appreciation of the new as an object. This interest arises out of the concern about the environmental emergencies we face today. Architectural engagements, whether for the new or old, not only requires ingenuity, but also involves finance, materials, and site. To elaborate the impact of the new on old and the issues of sustainability and climate change, I will now discuss briefly about materials and site. It is now well established that building and infrastructure construction contributes a substantial amount of greenhouse gas emissions, a major cause of climate change. The consumption of raw materials for the manufacturing of construction materials are also depleting scarce resources. Though the main responsibility of reforming the current production practices lie with the industry, but the role of architects are also important. Architects, by adopting a policy of enhancing the life of existing and sustainable construction materials and technology, can make valuable contribution in the effort towards a sustainable future. From materials, I go to site. Similar to materials, sites also have an important role in a sustainable future of the planet. Sites, as they exist in particular locations, are handed and taken over in the process of inheritance for their onward existence. Sites with all attributes present, specific, general, cultural, and natural, have the potentials of influencing the engagement that can result in a unique work of architecture. Sites and heritage have also played an important role in the production of new works. The decision related to the use of particular site needs to be carefully taken in consideration of the subsequent changes the use will bring. All now required is an extension of this role by establishing a harmonious relationship between the new and the old. The harmonious existence of the new and the old can be a model for the sustainable environment of future. This discussion so far establishes the need for refocusing on heritage, and one possible way of doing that is going beyond the current scope of including everything existing before deciding about the new in the whole. This view, as mentioned before, emerges from the consideration of emergencies faced by the planet. And this could be an important aspect of the new light that the organizers of this forum has referred in the theme of this forum. The opportunity of imagining a future overcoming the challenges facing the planet will require identification of strategies and charting of pathways to desired future. To work out these strategies and pathways, a comprehensive understanding of the existing is required. An exhaustive inventory of data of the planet and the identification of their interrelationships is fundamental to the understanding of the existing. This understanding can be the basis for the introduction of the new in the old and the management of a sustainable environment of the future on the basis of this understanding. If we look closely at our natural and the man-made world, we will find that there exists a very delicate balance. And if we are not careful about maintaining this balance, we put ourselves, future of this planet, in danger. So we need to approach whether it is heritage, old things, or new things, we need to take a new approach, a revision of the existing practice, and we need to develop a much better understanding than the way we approach at the moment. In one of our recent projects, an experimental school that was set in a floodplain of Bangladesh, we took a similar approach, but with modest means. It was an attempt to see how one can delicately, sensitively intervene in landscapes, in terrains where the environmental aspects are very crucial to the survival of the planet. So I may not have talked much about heritage buildings in my presentation, but this broad view, this offers me a possible way into the future that also includes heritage. Thank you so much for your attention.